It was the day that would change everything for Johnson Charles, a successful lawyer and heir to one of the wealthiest families in Lagos. In the heart of the city, where luxury and power ruled, Johnson found himself standing in front of his father's mansion. But what he didn't know was that a simple twist of fate would lead him to fall in love with the most unlikely person, a housemaid. In the heart of Lagos City, where the rich live, there was a very wealthy man named Charles. He was known by everyone because he was one of the richest businessmen in the city. He had big businesses and worked with the best companies that brought in cars from all over the world. Charles had a son, Johnson, who was his only child and the one who would take over the business someday. Johnson went to study law at the University of Sussex in London. He worked hard, and after finishing his studies, he returned to Lagos to help his father with the business and also learn how to run it. Johnson was a smart lawyer and had won many cases in court. He made his father proud with his success. But then, something unexpected happened. Charles, the man everyone trusted, got into big trouble. His business was suddenly in the news, not for good reasons. It turned out that Charles was involved in a case where drugs were being brought into the country with the cars he imported. The news spread quickly, and soon people started questioning everything about Charles's business. Everyone was shocked to hear that the rich businessman had a secret so dark. Johnson couldn't believe it. His father, who had always been his hero, was now in a mess that could destroy everything. Johnson felt torn. Should he defend his father, or should he do what is right? The trust people had in Charles started to fade away, and no one knew what would happen next. The news of the drug case spread fast, and now the whole city was talking about it. Johnson felt his world crashing down, unsure of what to do. Would his father's business survive? Would he have to give up everything his father had worked for? This story was just beginning. What would happen to Charles and his family? Would they be able to clear their name? Only time would tell. You're right. I missed the part where I should emphasize that his business partners and the government officials were acting out of envy. Let me adjust the story to make sure that part is clearer and flows with the rest. The customs service found a shocking surprise in one of the cars Charles had imported. Hidden deep inside the car, they found hard drugs. This was a big problem. The news spread quickly, and soon, Charles's business partners and even some powerful government officials got involved. They were upset and angry, but it didn't seem like they were just following the law. It felt like they were acting out of jealousy. They didn't like how successful Charles was and wanted to bring him down. They decided to take Charles to court. It wasn't just about the drugs anymore. They were trying to destroy his reputation and his business, maybe because they envied his success. The day before the first hearing in court, Charles sat down with his son, Johnson, to talk about what they should do. Charles was worried. He looked at Johnson with a serious face and asked, "How sure are we that we can win this case against all these powerful people? Maybe it's better if we just try to negotiate with them and settle this quietly." Johnson thought about it for a while. He didn't want to see his father lose everything, but he also knew they were up against some very strong people. Finally, he spoke up. "Okay, Dad. If you think it's the best thing to do, then let's try talking to Chief Ola and see if we can make a deal." Charles agreed. They needed to meet Chief Ola, someone who had connections with many of the people involved in the case. But would Chief Ola be willing to help? And would their negotiation work? No one knew. The family was walking a tightrope, and every decision they made could change their future. That evening, Mr. Charles and his son Johnson went to visit Chief Ola. When they arrived, they were welcomed warmly, and after shaking hands, they sat down to talk. Mr. Charles looked at Chief Ola and began explaining the reason for their visit. "You know I am innocent of this crime," he said. "I don't deal in drugs. Please, Chief Ola, help me settle this. I don't see myself winning this case. If there's anything you want my family and I to do in this negotiation, I am willing to do it." Chief Ola listened carefully, his face serious. Then, after a long pause, he smiled, but it was a strange, almost dangerous smile. Okay, I will send my words to you by this time tomorrow. We will negotiate, he said. Mr. Charles and Johnson left Chief Ola's house that evening feeling hopeful. They believed that Chief Ola would treat them fairly and help them get out of the terrible situation. But the next day, they received a message that shook them to their core. Chief Ola insisted that the only way to solve the problem was for Johnson, the only son of Mr. Charles, to marry his daughter. This was the price to pay for clearing the drug issue. When Johnson heard the news, he was angry and shocked. "I can't do that, father," he yelled, frustration filling his voice. "I can't marry a woman I've never even seen before. This isn't right." His voice trembled with emotion, and Mr. Charles didn't know what to say. The situation had turned from bad to worse. They had come for a solution, but now they were facing a terrible choice: lose everything or make a sacrifice they could never have imagined. Johnson's heart raced as he thought about the woman he would be forced to marry. Would he go through with it to save his family's business? Or would he find another way out? Mr. Charles stood there, looking at his son with a heart full of worry and pain. He took a deep breath and spoke to Johnson, his voice shaking a little. "Son, you must do this to save our family's name and reputation. These men have sworn to destroy us. We can't beat them. If we don't do this, all my years of hard work will mean nothing. I've worked so hard to build this business. It took me 40 years of investing and working nonstop." Johnson looked into his father's eyes. He could see the deep sadness and the pain of a father who had done everything for his family. It hurt Johnson to see his dad like this. His heart was heavy, but he knew he had to make a choice. "I will," Johnson said softly, his voice full of determination. "I will, for you, Dad, and for our family's name and the business you built." Mr. Charles felt a small sense of relief, but also sorrow. His son had made a big sacrifice, and it wasn't easy, but the decision was made. That evening, Mr. Charles picked up the phone and called Chief Ola. He let him know that Johnson had agreed to go ahead with the marriage plan. "Good. Your son made the right decision," Chief Ola said with a smile in his voice. "My daughter, Lily, will be coming to your house by the weekend to get to know your son better. Goodbye, Charles." With those final words, Chief Ola ended the call, leaving Mr. Charles feeling a mix of emotions. His son had made a huge sacrifice, and now the future of their family rested on a decision that had changed everything. Johnson, though, was still lost in thought. Was this the right decision? Was this the only way to save his family? As he looked at his father, he knew that the next few days would change everything. The weekend finally came, and Lily arrived at Mr. Charles's house. She stepped out of one of her father's exotic cars, walking with a proud look, as if she were the queen of the house. "Good day, Mr. Charles," she said with a smile. Then, turning to Johnson, she added, "And to my soon-to-be husband, good day." "I'm Lily Ola," she said with confidence. "I'm the daughter of the richest man in the country, and I am your wife." Johnson tried to smile, but it didn't feel real. "Good day, Lily. Nice to meet you," he said, doing his best to be polite, even though he didn't feel happy about the situation. That evening, the family had a small celebration to welcome Lily into the house. Everyone tried to make her feel comfortable, but as they all went to bed, Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that things were already starting to change. In just 1 week, Lily's behavior became a problem. She started to have issues with everyone in the house. The gatekeeper, the cook, the cleaners, and even the security guards. No one seemed to be able to do anything right in her eyes. She complained about everything, and she didn't treat anyone with respect. "She is arrogant, Mr. Charles," one of the workers said to him. "She wants to be first in everything, as if she's the owner of the house." Johnson heard all of this, but he said nothing. He only ignored her because he wanted to keep the peace and show respect to his father. Deep down, he knew this was not how things were supposed to be, but he couldn't speak up. His family had already made so many sacrifices, and he didn't want to make things worse. As the days passed, things only seemed to get worse. Lily's attitude became harder to ignore, and Johnson wondered if this was the price they had to pay to save the family's reputation. One evening, Johnson came back home from his office, tired but hopeful that things would get better. But as soon as he walked through the door, he was shocked. Lily had fired all the maids and cooks in the house. "They disobeyed me," Lily said with an arrogant tone. "They didn't listen to me, so I had to let them go." Johnson couldn't believe it. He rushed to find Lily and tried to explain that this wasn't the right thing to do. He was angry, but before he could speak, his father, Mr. Charles, stopped him. "Please, don't ignore her like you always do," Johnson, his father said, his voice full of worry. "Remember, we have our family's reputation to save." Hot tears started to roll down Johnson's face. He couldn't hold them back anymore. How long would this go on? How long would his family have to suffer because of Chief Ola and his daughter? Johnson whispered to himself, "How could my father's hard work be at the mercy of Chief Ola and Lily?" Mr. Charles saw his son's tears and walked over to comfort him. "Let's keep going, son," he said softly. "One day, we will find a solution to this. We have to stay strong." In the next week, new maids and cooks were hired to replace the ones Lily had fired. The house was busy with new faces, and everyone was trying to get back to normal. Among the new staff was Miss Vivian. She was a beautiful, dark-skinned lady in her early 20s. Her beauty was hard to miss, but what made her stand out even more was how respectful and humble she was. Vivian was assigned to work in the kitchen, where she quickly proved to be hardworking and kind to everyone. Johnson couldn't help but notice her. Miss Vivian seemed like a breath of fresh air in the house, unlike Lily. Vivian worked hard every day, doing her job like it was the most important thing in the world. When she wasn't busy in the kitchen, she would help the cleaners with the house. She worked so well that in just a few weeks, everyone in the house began to love her. "Since Vivian came here, I've been having my 3 square meals served to me on time," said the gateman, smiling. "Me too," the security guard agreed. "She's so kind and always smiling. She is just so humble and smart," one of the cleaners said. Vivian was not only good at her job, but she was also friendly and made everyone feel special. She would always greet Johnson with a warm smile, and she even carried his briefcase for him. "Good evening, sir," she would say. "How was work today? Hope you defended the law with all your strength." "Yes, I did," Johnson would reply, smiling back. He couldn't help but wonder how a maid could be so intelligent and smart. But he didn't mind it. He enjoyed talking to Vivian. "Your food is ready, sir." Vivian would invite him to dinner, always taking care of everything. Unlike Vivian, Lily didn't like doing anything herself. She didn't want to lift a finger or get involved in any work. As long as she had Vivian around to do everything for her, she was happy. Lily would sit in her room, staring at her phone, watching the Lagos ladies' fashion show, as if the world around her didn't matter. If Johnson ever needed anything, Vivian was always there to help. She made his days easier, and he began to feel grateful for her presence. But things weren't always perfect. Vivian's kindness had started to make a difference, and Johnson wondered how Lily would react. One day, Johnson received a big opportunity. He was recommended to work as the lawyer for one of the biggest production companies in the country. Excited, he spent the whole evening on the phone with the company's manager, going over legal details and ensuring everything was in order. But then, Johnson hit a small problem. He was on a call discussing an important legal quotation, but he suddenly couldn't remember the exact line. He panicked for a moment, trying to recall it. It seemed like everything was slipping away. Just as he was struggling, he heard a soft voice behind him. It was Vivian. She had overheard the conversation and knew exactly what he needed. "It's Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Civil Code," she said calmly, giving him the exact quotation he was looking for. Johnson quickly gave her a thumbs up while still on the phone with the manager. He was amazed. How could a maid know something so specific about the law? He couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, as he tried to sleep, his mind raced. How does Vivian know the law? He wondered. I need to know more about her. The next morning, as he was about to leave for work, Lily handed him a list of things she needed for the new week. When Johnson looked at the list, his eyes widened. It was a long list, and the total cost was in the millions of naira. Take this, Johnson, Lily said, handing him the list with a serious expression. This is what your wife needs for the new week. I need these things as soon as possible. Johnson was shocked. He couldn't believe the amount of money Lily was asking for. I would spend such an amount of money only on you, Lily? For goodness sake, this is too much, he said, his voice full of disbelief. Lily, as always, remained calm and replied softly, I don't mind, Johnson. As Johnson looked at the long list, he felt a mix of frustration and confusion. How could Lily ask for so much? Johnson walked out of his room, still filled with anger. The list Lily had handed him weighed heavily on his mind, and the extravagant demands were frustrating. He couldn't understand how she could ask for so much. But as he walked into the dining room, his thoughts were interrupted. Your breakfast is ready, sir, Vivian said, greeting him with her usual warm smile. She had prepared one of his favorite meals, potato chips and green tea. Johnson had loved potatoes since he was a child. Despite his anger that morning, the smell of the food was so inviting, he couldn't resist. He sat down slowly at the table and uncovered the plate. The aroma filled the room, making his stomach growl with hunger. He took a bite and felt a moment of peace. The taste was perfect, just the way he liked it. He ate to his satisfaction, letting the food calm him down for a bit. As he finished, he stood up slowly, feeling a little lighter. Thank you, Vivian, he said, his voice softening. He walked towards the door, his anger slowly fading. Vivian smiled and nodded. What would you like to have when you come back, sir? Johnson paused for a moment, thinking. Anything delicious, he replied with a small smile. As he walked outside, he felt a strange comfort from Vivian's kindness. It was the little moments like these that made him wonder more about her. What kind of person was she? And why was she so different from Lily? That morning, after serving Johnson his breakfast, Vivian went to check on the gateman. When she arrived at his post, she noticed something was wrong. He looked very sick and had a high fever. Vivian felt worried and knew she had to do something quickly. She rushed to find Lily and told her about the gateman's condition. But instead of being concerned, Lily spoke very harshly. Am I a doctor? She snapped. Why are you disturbing me with this? I have my own things to do. Vivian was taken aback by Lily's harsh words, but she didn't argue. She could tell Lily was upset, so Vivian decided to wait. She would tell Johnson when he got back, hoping he could do something to help. When Johnson returned later that day, Vivian explained what had happened. The gateman is very sick, and I told Lily, but she was angry with me and didn't help. I had to wait for you. Johnson was shocked. He didn't understand why Lily hadn't called for the family doctor or done something to help. Why didn't you tell her that she needed to call the doctor? He asked, feeling frustrated. I tried, Vivian said quietly. But she didn't listen, so I had to wait. Johnson felt a mix of emotions. He didn't like seeing Vivian treated that way, but he was also worried about the gateman's health. That evening, he called the family doctor and arranged for the gateman to receive care. The doctor came quickly and took good care of him, making sure he was stable. As the doctor worked, Johnson couldn't help but feel grateful for Vivian's care. She was always so kind and responsible, even when others didn't care. At his office, Johnson couldn't stop thinking about Vivian. She was always so nice, humble, and smart. He couldn't believe how perfect she seemed. She's everything I need in a woman, he thought. She's kind, a good cook, and still so intelligent. He couldn't help but compare her to Lily, who only cared about fashion and the latest cars. During lunch, Johnson called his friend, Michael, to talk about it. Guy, There's this cook at home. She's everything I need in a woman, and I'm starting to like her like crazy. She's intelligent, a good cook, and still humble. Not like Lily, who only wants the newest fashion and the latest car in town. Michael was surprised. Really? You think you found your wife already? Johnson nodded. Yeah, I feel like I've found someone special. If she's really the one, I don't mind giving up everything for her. I'll even let my father's business go if that's what it takes. Michael stared at him, a bit shocked. Really, Johnson? But don't forget your father worked so hard to build this business. Don't let his sacrifices go to waste. You're the only one who can save it now. Johnson looked out the window, deep in thought. His mind was torn. On one hand, he felt a strong pull toward Vivian, but on the other, he knew how much his father had sacrificed. He didn't want to let his father's hard work be in vain. With a sigh, he stood up. Let me go home and see my new wife, Vivian, he said jokingly, climbing downstairs, trying to hide the confusion in his heart. During the weekend, Michael came over to Johnson's house, but he pretended to visit just to see Johnson. Hey, Michael. You came unannounced. Is everything okay? Johnson asked, surprised to see him. When has visiting my friend become a crime? Michael joked. I came to see you. The two friends shook hands and then went over to dinner, where Vivian had prepared hot jollof rice with chicken. The smell of the food filled the room, and everyone was excited to eat. Do you need more rice, sir? Vivian asked Johnson. No, I'm full, Johnson replied, smiling at her. Do you need more too, sir? She asked Michael. Yeah, a little more will do, Michael said, digging into his meal. This rice is too sweet to ignore. I told you, Johnson said playfully. I told you she's a good cook. Later that evening, after dinner, Michael decided to talk to Vivian. He walked up to her and handed her his phone number. I like you, Vivian, he said with a smile. I'd like to know more about you. Vivian looked at him, but she didn't seem interested. She answered politely but firmly. Please, sir, I'm not expected to talk to strangers in my place of work. I don't want my Oga and Madam to sack me. Michael wasn't happy with her answer. Please, if you want to know me, go through my employers. I see you're respectful, Vivian, but come on, I can change your life. How long will you continue to work as a maid? I can take you around the world if you accept my request to be my lover, he said proudly. Vivian felt nervous and stepped back. No, sir, I don't want to, she said, her voice shaking a little. I'm okay working here. She turned to walk away, trying to get back to her duties. I will go back to my duty post now, she said, her heart racing. Michael stood there for a few seconds, watching her walk away. He smiled to himself, thinking, she's stubborn, but I'll deal with her. The tension in the air was thick, and Johnson had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. Day by day, Lily's bad behavior only got worse. She started disrespecting Mr. Charles, shouting at Johnson, and even beating up the maids. She didn't care about anyone but herself, and whenever she wanted something, she got it, no matter who was hurt in the process. One hot afternoon, Johnson couldn't take it anymore. He looked at Lily and said firmly, You must go back to your parents. Your behavior is unbearable. Mr. Charles's eyes widened in fear. No, Johnson, you shouldn't do this, she cried. This marriage is our only hope to keep the family's reputation. But Johnson was resolute. He turned to his father, who was standing nearby, and said, No, Dad. I will prove you right in court. This lady must go. This family doesn't need people like her. With that, Johnson packed all of Lily's things, threw them into a car, and drove off. His heart was heavy, but he knew he couldn't let this go on any longer. He arrived at Chief Ola's compound and walked up the stairs with determination. Good afternoon, sir, Johnson said as he entered. I brought your daughter back. I can't endure her bad behavior anymore. Please have her back. Chief Ola was shocked. What are you saying, Johnson? He shouted angrily. You are breaking my daughter's heart. You can't just leave her like this. Johnson stood his ground. I would rather defend my father and family in court than marry your daughter, he said, his voice strong. With those words, he turned around and walked away, leaving Chief Ola standing there, furious. Johnson! Johnson! Chief Ola yelled after him. You and your father will end up in jail. You think you can do this and just walk away? I'll make your life miserable. You will hear from me. Johnson didn't look back. He knew that what he had done was the right choice, but deep down, he could feel the weight of the consequences. What would happen next? Would Chief Ola really make good on his threats? The future was uncertain, and Johnson's heart was racing with worry. Johnson got home that evening, feeling the weight of the day on his shoulders. He walked into the kitchen where Vivian was preparing dinner. The smell of fried rice and chicken filled the air, making his stomach growl. My dear, he said softly, trying to shake off the stress. What are you preparing for tonight? Fried rice with chicken, sir, Vivian replied, smiling as she stirred the pot. That's okay, Johnson said, his voice calm. You don't mind if I keep you company, right? No problem, sir, Vivian answered, still focused on her cooking. The kitchen was quiet for a few minutes, the only sound being the sizzling of the rice in the pan. Johnson stared at the floor, deep in thought. Finally, he spoke up. I only agreed to marry Lily because of the situation my dad's business is in, he said quietly. He was set up by his business partners with drugs. The custom officers found drugs in the company's goods. Till now, we don't know how to prove it in court. I can't marry Lily. I'd rather defend my father than marry her. Vivian stopped what she was doing and turned to look at him. Sir, she said politely, her voice soft but firm. If you don't want to marry Lily, go to court and use every means possible to defend your family. You also have this marriage agreement to fight for your right. Johnson nodded in agreement, his heart a little lighter. You have a point there. Thank you, Vivian, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. He gave her a small smile before leaving the kitchen, his mind still spinning with the thoughts of his father and the court case. Over the next few weeks, the court case began. The evidence against the Charles family was overwhelming. The witnesses, including the customs service, all spoke against them. Johnson, on the other hand, had nothing but the marriage certificate as his only evidence. He felt hopeless, unsure of how to win this case. But as the weeks turned into months, something unexpected happened. Johnson found himself falling deeper in love with Vivian. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized that she was the one he wanted. He didn't care about his family's status or wealth anymore. He was ready to forsake everything for her, for what his heart truly desired. One evening, as they sat together, Johnson finally opened up. Vivian, he said softly, I want to be with you. I know who I am, and I know what I feel for you. I don't care about my family's status or their money. All I want is you. At first, Vivian was frightened. She had never imagined this would happen. But Johnson kept talking, explaining how much he cared for her. Slowly, she began to understand. He convinced her that he wanted to be with her, and after some time, she accepted his feelings. But when Mr. Charles found out about their relationship, he was furious. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He stormed into the room where Vivian was, his face red with anger. How dare you, he shouted. How dare you get close to my son? You think you can just steal him away from our family? I will make sure you regret this. He yelled and threatened Vivian, his voice full of rage. Vivian was terrified. She had never seen Mr. Charles this angry before. His words were like daggers, and the fear in her heart grew with each threat. The next day, Vivian could no longer bear the fear. She ran away from the Charles house, her heart heavy with sadness and fear. She didn't know where to go, but she knew she couldn't stay in that house anymore. When Johnson returned home that day and found out that Vivian had left, his heart broke into pieces. He cried and cried, the tears flowing without stopping until he was too tired to cry anymore. He had lost his last hope of happiness. Vivian was his joy, his laughter, and the reason he had felt alive. Without her, It felt like his world was falling apart. "I'll stay single," Johnson whispered to himself. "I'll stay single until I find Vivian again, no matter how long it takes. She is everything to me." The days felt long and empty without her. His mind was filled with nothing but thoughts of Vivian. How could he fix everything? Where had she gone? The thought of living without her made his heart ache. Meanwhile, the court case was not going well. The case was lost at the local level, and it was now being moved to the state level. Chief Ola and his partners were still determined to destroy Mr. Charles's reputation, and they would stop at nothing to win. It felt like the family was sinking deeper into a pit with no way out. Mr. Charles, who had once been a strong and proud man, was now weak. He was losing everything, his business, his reputation, and now his health was failing too. The stress of the court case had left him mentally sick. Vivian, on the other hand, was far away, starting a new chapter in her life. After leaving the Charles household, she found a new job opportunity. A company she had applied to for a law-related job had called her, offering her the chance to work with them. She had applied for the job after she received her certificate as a certified lawyer in the country, and she was eager to start her career. She applied for a position at a well-known company, hoping to begin her journey in law. But when she met the boss at the company, things took a turn she wasn't expecting. The boss told her that before offering her the job, she would need to have an affair with him. Vivian was shocked and disgusted. She refused his request and walked away from the opportunity. She didn't give up, though. Instead, she decided to look for another job. After some time, she applied for a position as a house help at the Charles household. Though it wasn't her dream job, it was something she could do while she figured out her next steps. She worked hard and did her best, but Vivian knew she had more potential than just being a house help. Things changed for Vivian when the boss who had treated her poorly at the company retired. A new boss took over, and when he saw Vivian's CV, he was impressed by her qualifications. He called her to offer her the job she deserved, giving her a fresh start. Vivian took the opportunity, and within just a year of working at the company, she was promoted to a magistrate. She worked even harder and earned another promotion to become a judge. Meanwhile, the court case involving the Charles family and their opponents was heating up. It was so important that some high-profile judges were moved from different regions to help decide the final judgment. Vivian was chosen as one of the judges to work on the Supreme Court case. The day of the judgment had arrived, and Johnson's heart was filled with uncertainty. He had no control over the outcome. All he could do was wait for the judge's final decision. He had promised himself that no matter what happened, he would stay single and never marry Lily, even if it went against his father's wishes. The case seemed to be heading toward a terrible end. The evidence against the Charles family was so strong that it looked like Johnson's opponents would win. Mr. Charles could face 25 years in prison or be forced to pay a huge fine of $300 million. It seemed like the Charles family was going to lose everything. But then, something unexpected happened. As the lawyers were preparing for the final decision, one of them stood up and made a surprising announcement. "The case is adjourned for 2 weeks," the lawyer said. Johnson, Mr. Charles, and Lily all looked at each other, stunned. This wasn't what they expected. What was happening? Why was the case being paused? And who had made this decision? To everyone's shock, it was Vivian, the same Vivian who had worked as a maid in the Charles household. Lily gasped, and Mr. Charles was frozen in disbelief. Johnson's eyes widened in surprise. This was the most shocking moment of their lives. Soon, the witnesses and everyone in the courtroom began to leave one after the other. At Chief Ola's house, the tension was thick. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Adjournment? Why? How could this happen? Chief Ola's mind raced with questions. He knew this was bad news for him and his allies. One of Chief Ola's men stood up and said, "We must go after the newly appointed judge and win her over for this case. We can't afford to lose." Yes, Chief Ola agreed. his voice filled with frustration. But the judge who adjourned the case was once Charles's maid, their cook, precisely. Lily added, I don't know how she got to this position. I never thought she'd end up like this. The fear in the room grew. With her now in charge, we might lose this case to Charles, Lily said nervously. Chief Ola's face darkened as he realized the stakes. The future of the case, and perhaps the future of his entire plan, was now in the hands of someone who once served the Charles family. Fear began to take hold of their minds. Back at the Charles home, the family was still in shock, but a small amount of tension had been released. The unexpected adjournment of the case left them confused and full of questions. How could this have happened? Was she really a lawyer? Johnson wondered aloud. No wonder she was so intelligent, he added, finally putting the pieces together. Mr. Charles sat in his chair, feeling ashamed of how he had treated Vivian in the past. He regretted the day he had insisted that she leave their home. How could he have been so blind? Vivian had been nothing but kind and hardworking, yet he had pushed her away. Now she was in a position to help them, and he felt a deep sense of guilt. The next day, Johnson received an unexpected call. It was Vivian's personal assistant, asking him to come to her office. Johnson was curious, but also nervous. When he arrived, Vivian greeted him with warmth and respect. Hello, Johnson, she said with a smile. I'm glad you could come. Johnson returned the smile, still amazed by how much had changed. Thank you for everything you've done, Vivian, he said. Vivian took a deep breath and explained, I canceled the adjournment of the case because I know your father is innocent. Those men forged those charges against him. They wanted to destroy him for their own reasons. Johnson's eyes widened in disbelief. You're going to help us? He asked, his voice filled with hope. Yes, Vivian replied. In the days to come, I will stand as a witness for you against Chief Ola and his partners in crime. On that day, I will be addressed as the maid who worked as a cook in the Charles household when that case first started. Johnson felt a wave of gratitude and relief wash over him. Vivian was no longer just the maid from the past. She was now a powerful ally, someone who would help clear his family's name and fight for justice. As he left her office, he felt a new sense of hope. The case was far from over, but with Vivian on their side, things were finally starting to look brighter. The day of the final judgment arrived, and the entire court was filled with tension. Everyone waited anxiously for what might happen next. Mr. Charles sat quietly next to his son, Johnson, feeling nervous and uncertain. What might happen today? Mr. Charles asked softly. We will see the end today, Johnson replied, his voice steady but his heart racing. The court was packed, and the air was thick with suspense. As the final moments of the case approached, the overall judge stood up and addressed the room. Is there anyone here who has something to say before the last judgment is passed? The judge asked. Just then, a small hand was raised among the judges. It was Vivian, the maid from the Charles household. She stepped forward and walked slowly to the witness box. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, Vivian said, her voice calm but strong. I am Vivian, the maid at the Charles home during the time this case first broke out and was first recorded in the newspapers. The room fell silent as everyone turned to listen to her. Vivian continued, Miss Lily is Chief Ola's daughter, who was living with Mr. Charles at the time, with the hope that Johnson, Mr. Charles's only son, would marry her. Johnson's heart skipped a beat as Vivian spoke. He had no idea what she was about to reveal, but he could tell that this was something important. Vivian took a deep breath and said, according to the marriage documents, the marriage was used against Mr. Charles in order to make the drug case go away. If not, Chief Ola promised to destroy Mr. Charles's reputation. Gasps filled the room as Vivian's words sank in. The courtroom was stunned by her testimony. To prove that the drug case was made up by Chief Ola and his partners in crime, Vivian said, I have this call record. It's a conversation between Miss Lily and her father, Chief Ola. The call was made while Lily was still staying in Mr. Charles's home. Vivian clicked a button, and the room filled with the sound of the call. It was Lily's voice, speaking to her father, Chief Ola. They could all hear Lily's voice clearly as she said, "We need to deal with Charles. The drug saga will work perfectly. We'll make sure he's framed for it, and then we can take over all his properties." The room was in shock. The call revealed the truth behind the fake drug charges and how Lily and her father had planned to ruin Mr. Charles. Vivian stood tall, her heart pounding, but she knew she had done the right thing. She had helped expose the truth, and now the world would finally know who was behind the lies. For a few minutes, the entire courtroom was completely silent. Everyone was still, trying to process what they had just heard. The voices of Lily and her father, Chief Ola, echoed in their minds. The truth had come to light, and it was clear that the case was no longer about the Charles family. It was about the lies and the corruption behind the charges. The judge picked up her microphone, and the room held its breath. With the new evidence from the call, recorded by Vivian, the maid who once worked in the Charles household, the judge made her decision. Based on the evidence presented today, the judge said, her voice strong, "From the office of a judge and an advocate of the law in this nation, I declare the Charles family innocent of these charges. The accusations against them were false." A wave of relief spread through the room, especially from Mr. Charles and his family. But the judge wasn't done yet. She continued, "Chief Ola and his colleagues are found guilty of forging charges and intimidating the Charles family. They will each receive years of imprisonment." Lily gasped, but the judge was not finished. "Lily," she said, her voice stern, "you are sentenced to 7 years in prison with hard labor, or you can pay a redeemable price of $50 million. The room grew tense again as everyone waited for the next part of the judgment. "And as for you, Chief Ola," the judge said, looking directly at him, "for your actions of forgery and intimidation, you are sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment with hard labor." In that moment, joy and relief spread through the courtroom. Mr. Charles and his family were free. Songs of joy and freedom rang out from their side of the room. They hugged and celebrated, their hearts full of happiness after so many long months of fear and uncertainty. But on the other side of the courtroom, it was a different story. Chief Ola's side was filled with pain and anger. His dreams of taking over the Charles family's wealth and reputation had crumbled. His colleagues, who had stood by him, now faced prison time for their involvement in the crime. Tears of happiness mixed with tears of regret, and the room was filled with mixed emotions. The truth had finally been revealed, and justice had been served. Outside the courtroom, the air was filled with excitement and happiness. Johnson couldn't contain his joy anymore. After everything that had happened, after all the struggles, the truth was finally out, and his family was free. The victory was sweet, but there was something else Johnson needed to do, something that had been on his heart for a long time. He turned to Vivian, who had been by his side through everything. His heart raced as he looked at her. With a big smile, he asked, "Will you marry me now?" Vivian looked at him, her heart full of emotions. She smiled softly. "Yes, I will," she replied, her voice gentle but sure. "Yes, yes," Johnson shouted, lifting Vivian up from the ground. The happiness in his heart overflowed, and he couldn't help but show it. He raised her from her knees and carried her like a baby, spinning around in pure joy. As he spun her, thousands of young lawyers, magistrates, and judges watched them with smiles and admiration. Johnson laughed and looked into Vivian's eyes. "You are my queen, my life, my hope, my joy," he said, his voice filled with love and emotion. Tears of happiness began to run down his face as he realized how far they had come. Vivian stood still, looking at him with a soft smile, nodding her head in affirmation. Her heart was full as she whispered back, "Yes, my lord." She kept replying, "Yes," over and over, as if confirming everything they had been through had led to this moment. The moment was perfect. The joy they felt was so strong, and all the pain from the past seemed to melt away. Johnson and Vivian were ready to start a new chapter together, their love stronger than ever. The marriage planning began with great excitement. The Charles family was filled with joy, and even Mr. Charles, who had gone through so much, felt a deep sense of peace. One day, he called Vivian privately. He looked at her with a sincere expression on his face and said, "Vivian, I want to ask for your forgiveness. I am truly sorry for how I treated you in the past. You've shown kindness and strength, and I regret my actions towards you." Vivian smiled at him, understanding that he had truly changed. "It's all right, Mr. Charles," she said softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is how we move forward." The day of the wedding finally arrived. The sun shone brightly, and the air was filled with excitement. Everyone gathered to witness the union of Johnson and Vivian, a love story that had overcome many challenges. The priest stood before them, ready to pronounce them husband and wife. "Vivian," the priest said, looking at her with a kind smile. "Do you take Johnson as your wedded husband?" Vivian's heart swelled with joy as she looked at Johnson, her eyes shining. With a warm smile, she said, "Yes, I do." The priest turned to Johnson. "And Johnson, do you take Vivian as your one and only wife?" Johnson looked at Vivian with love and admiration, his heart racing. "Yes, I do," he replied, his voice full of certainty. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of drums and brass filled the air. The celebration had begun. The music played loudly and the guests cheered with joy. Everyone around them was happy to see this beautiful couple finally come together. The love between Johnson and Vivian was stronger than ever, and the future looked bright for them. From this story, we can learn some important lessons that we can apply in our own lives. The power of forgiveness. Sometimes we make mistakes and hurt others, even those who don't deserve it. But true strength lies in being able to admit when we're wrong and asking for forgiveness. Mr. Charles's humility in seeking forgiveness from Vivian is a beautiful example of how we can heal past wounds and move forward with kindness and understanding. True love is built on respect. Vivian and Johnson's love story shows that true love is not just about grand gestures, but about respect, trust, and the willingness to support one another. It teaches us that love isn't about perfection. It's about growth, learning, and standing by each other through the good and bad times. Changing for the better. People can change. Mr. Charles's journey from being a man who treated Vivian poorly to one who asked for forgiveness shows us that we all have the capacity to grow, learn from our mistakes, and become better individuals. It's never too late to change and improve our relationships with others. The power of humility. Throughout the story, humility shines through. Vivian, despite her hardships, remains kind and respectful. Mr. Charles, too, humbles himself in front of Vivian, acknowledging his wrongs. Humility helps us connect with others, build strong relationships, and find peace within ourselves. Hope and second chances. Lastly, the story reminds us that no matter how difficult life may seem, there is always hope. Vivian's journey from being a maid to becoming a judge and eventually marrying Johnson shows that even in the toughest situations, a brighter future is possible. Life gives us second chances if we are willing to take them. In our own lives, let's strive to be humble, show respect, ask for forgiveness when needed, and never lose hope. Life is full of challenges, but it's also full of opportunities to grow, change, and love.